Okay, tonight's the 16th of Shvat, so Tu BiShvat Poreach, everybody. Tu BiShvat just passed. And as we know, there's no such thing as an observance of Tu BiShvat, the whole thing that they do now with the Seder, while I'm actually pretty much for those. I've attended Tu BiShvat Seders. I've even written about them. I included the mention of them even in Haggadah Pesach. I have a soft spot for those things, but once again, that's not a mitzvah, as the rabbi said. Tu B'Shvat's a cutoff day. There's two interesting halachas I wanted to mention relevant to what just transpired today. That is the first. It says, the Rambam writes in Hilchos Truma, the fifth parak, the 13th or the 11th halacha, depending which version you have. He says, Ein tormim peroth shanazol peroth shanashe avra. We cannot take the truma portion from one year's crop on another year's crop, or from this year for that year, or this year the past year from this one. And there's a cutoff date for that. So he's going to talk about the cutoff dates. Basically, each crop is tithed on its own, so you have to know the cutoff date for each particular crop. He continues, Liket Yarak Erev Rosh Hashanah Ad Shelo Ba Shemesh. If he were to, let's say, pick vegetables, collecting vegetables, disconnecting the vegetables from their vines on the ground, let's say cucumbers and zucchinis. So what would happen? Ad Shelo Ba Shemesh. It was Erev Rosh Hashanah, 29th of Tishrei, before sundown. The Chazar Liket Achar Sheba Shemesh. And then he went and he picked some vegetables after sundown. Now, wait a minute. He's picking vegetables after sundown on the 29th of Elul, 29th of Elul. It's now the 1st of Tishrei. It's a Yom Tov. It is forbidden to do so. He will be lashed for doing so. Yes, he will be lashed for doing so. But assume he did. After the fact, Ein Tormim Zeh. One cannot separate the truma portion from this group of vegetables on that group of vegetables. Oh, they're growing in the patch right next to each other. Yeah, but some were picked before the cutoff date. What's the cutoff date? The 1st of Tishrei. That's Rosh Hashanah for vegetables. So this is considered one crop, and that's considered another crop. Shezeh Chadash v'zeh Yashan. This is the new crop, and that's the old crop. Yeah, how many minutes are between them? Probably 2 minutes, but still, they're considered separate years. That's what the Rambam writes there. I just lost it on my screen. Give me a second. And the Rambam continues. We can say this outside, but I want to read it exactly as the Rambam had it. He continues. It says, how do you know this? If he were to actually, let's say, anyways, take the truma portion from one crop on behalf of the other crop, say, okay, this is the truma from this crop, it doesn't work. The Torah says, separate your tithes every single year. Rambam continues, hold on one second, I already read that. I skipped around here, sorry. Let's say he were to have picked an esrog off the esrog tree on the Erev Chamisha Asar B'Shvat. He could have just said Bar Asar B'Shvat. He could have said on the 14th of Shvat. No, the day before the 15th of Shvat. Ad Shelo Ba Shemesh, before the sun went down. The Chazer Liket Esrog Acher Mishabah Shemesh. And then he picks another esrog off the same tree right after sundown. Ein Tormim Yizel Zeh. These esrogim considered different crop years. Why? Because an esrog, its crop year depends on when you pick it, like a vegetable. Even though its cutoff date is like that of a fruit, not Rosh Hashanah, it's the Rosh Hashanah for fruit trees, it follows this rule that depends when you pick it. If we were talking about an apple tree, the cutoff date would also be Tu B'Shvat, but we'd have to actually look not when he picked the apple off the tree, but rather when the apple ripened on the tree. It says, Ein Torah Mimazel Zeh, Mipnei She'achad B'Tishrei Rosh Hashanah L'Masrot Tuvoav Yerakot V'Kitniot. You can't mix the crop years. Why? The 1st of Tishrei is the new year for tithes and grain, vegetables, and kitnias. Kitnias is everything that's not a vegetable or a grain, but it grows to the ground and people eat it. It's not a fruit. Whereas the 15th of Shvat is the new year, the cutoff date for the tithes of the tree. Tithes, in the general sense, also for the truma. Hold on one second. I just lost it again. Okay. So that's the Rambam in that halacha. There's two things I'd like to point out here for those diktuk experts. The proper way to refer to the yesterday was Chamisha Asar B'Shvat. the 15th of Shvat. And in Hebrew shorthand, we would substitute 2, Tet Vav. By the way, only the last few hundred years, it used to be we'd write Yud Hey. But people stopped writing Yud Hey as a gematria to represent a number because it spells one of God's holy names. So they started writing 2, Tet Vav. And then people started reading it as though that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. They would say Tu Bishvat. That's incorrect. That's not how you're supposed to do it. Proper Hebrew is you whenever you encounter, let's say, a gematria, like 14, you don't read it as Yad. And you encounter Yud Zayin or Tet Zayin, you don't read it as Yaz or Taz. You're supposed to say the full number, Chamisha Asar, Shiva Asar, Asara, whatever it might be. And it's always masculine form. So it would be Chamisha Asar or Chamisha Bit, and then you say the month. That's the way to read it. Okay. The second thing that we learn from this halacha is, like everywhere else in the Rambam's uh, complete redaction of the law, the cutoff time between days, and in this case between months and also years, is, wait for it, sundown. Right? The Rambam says very clearly, before sundown it's this year, after sundown it's that year. And this is regarding, by the way, biblical law. Even though, yes, already in later times, a lot of the laws regarding tides, according to the Rambam, are only in rabbinic in nature because, the Jewish people are not living on their land, and the Yovel and Shemitah are not properly counted. Even then, those were rabbinic enactments when they ceased to be biblically enforced. It's still the same standard. So this is a biblical standard that the cutoff line between dates is sundown, before sundown, after sundown. He didn't say, and Ben Ashmashos, you're kind of stuck. He didn't say that which is picked before sundown is this year, that which picked after Tzeis is the next year. Why? Because as we pointed out in the Rambam's world, the only time we consider Tzeis to be a time of doubt is regarding Shabbos. Okay, regarding specifically also the Malach Shabbos and what liabilities there are, and Mila as another extension of that. And Seis is only a standard regarding what? Hari of Shemesh for people who went to mikvah, and what time to count Kriyas Shema, what time to recite Kriyas Shema at night. For every other din, it's implied in the Rambam and explicit in later places, although this stopped being it, that sundown is good enough. So you could daven Mariv after sundown. That was always the line, and it wasn't brought up. And it was only later, and we're going to talk about this in the coming weeks, it was only later that everybody just started getting machmir for every single mitzvah you could find. Make it, it has to be at night. Make sure you do it after it says. And this applies to many things that are coming up. In another halacha, which is now in, okay, here's a Meiser Sheni. The Rambam says, right at the beginning of the first parak, the second halacha, Rambam tells us, the first of Tishrei, who Rosh Hashanah l'Ma'asar, Tivuak v'Kidniot v'Yarkot. Once again, that's the cutoff point. The first Tishrei is for the cutoff point for the tides of the grains, the kidneys, and the vegetables. Anytime we just say Rosh Hashanah Stam, like in our own language, we're referring to the first of Tishrei. The 15th of Shvat is the new year, the cutoff date for the fruit of the tree, the tides that we take from the fruit trees. How is that? Kitzad. If we're dealing with grain or kidneys, vegetables that have already achieved their state, that now it's Meiser season, before Rosh Hashanah of the third year, so they were picked during that third year. So one would take from them Meiser Sheni, like you would in the second year. But if they only achieve this Onath Ma'asroth, means the time for taking out the tides, which by the way is when you pick them because they're vegetables, after Rosh Hashanah of the Shlishit. Hold on 1 second. Because now it's the third year, so now you take the Masarani. Masarani is what's taken out on the third year. So too, fruits of the tree that have achieved their Onaf Masroth, that means when they ripen, before the 15th of Shvat in this third year, even though they were gathered at the end of this third year, we consider them as having achieve the state already, that readiness, already in the second year. So we'd take out only Maser Sheni, like it's an ordinary second year. If they get to this point, Onath Masroth, in before the 15th of the fourth year, even though they're collected in the fourth year, we treat them like their third year fruit, and we would take out the Masarani from them. But if they were achieved this date after the 15th of Shvat, which is today, that was today, Mitasrin Labo. So now it's already the next year. So there you go. That's why this is a halacha. So you have to know when you're picking. It's kind of interesting. The Rambam talks about picking the esrog. I didn't mention that halacha, the next one. Sorry, the Rambam said about the esrog. The esrog, someone asked, wait a minute, how does the Rambam hold it with esrog? He says an esrog is like a fruit in that you look where's its line? The line, its date is the 15th of Shvat, unlike a vegetable. However, when is this? What act makes it ready for the meiser? The picking. Okay. With regards to vegetables, it's when you pick them. Did you pick them before or after Rosh Hashanah? Esrog is, did you pick it before or after the 15th of Shavat? With regards to every other fruit, you don't say when you picked it before or after Tu B'Shvat. You say when did it reach Hanata, which is, like I said, a state of the ripening. That's when you look at the fruit, not when you necessarily pick the fruit. Okay, interesting. So you treat an esrog like a fruit. Sometimes you treat it like a vegetable. Why did Chazal do that? Because an esrog grows differently than the usual fruit trees around here. Go outside, the fruit isn't on the tree right now. Okay, the trees are only going to start to bloom soon. The song, see, the piyut. Yeah, how you know Tu B'Shvat is now a holiday? Because you eat special foods, you drink wine, and you even sing a song. And all the kids know the song, so it must be a holiday. They even call it a holiday. So the shkedia, that would be the almond tree, is already blooming. Okay, everybody who has one looks quite nice. That's the sign. And the fruit trees are going to follow. There's no fruit on the trees. There's barely any leftovers. But the esrogim are on the trees right now. Matter of fact, a very nice esrog growing on the tree. Hopefully, it'll stick around. My esrog's on the wrong schedule. My esrogim basically ripen early in the summer, and then come Sukkot time, it's like hard to find a good esrog. Okay, what are you going to do? So you're going to look at this. The esrogim are inherently different. So Chazal said they have different rules than the usual fruit trees. And as been pointed out, you look at this, historically speaking, in these parts, esrogim were the only citrus fruit. And later, thanks to genetic toying around and also bringing fruits from the east, we have more variety in our citrus fruits. We have lemons and oranges, Jaffa oranges, and then clementines come later. There's grapefruits. There's all sorts of things. They're all varieties of each other. You can very creative breeding and selective breeding led to the creation of all these other citrus fruits, which might, technically speaking, be considered by Chazal to be a whole other species. But poskim consider the lemon too different from the esrog. That's why they're upset when people start grafting lemons and esrogs. Lemons were new, relatively speaking, even the Shulchan Aruch times. He considers lemon to be a foreign fruit. So the Ramban says that Hadar, which is the biblical word for the esrog, is the Hebrew name of esrog. Esrog is sort of a Persian name. And in modern Hebrew, they're using Hadar to represent all the citrus fruits. So citrus medica is the main one. That's the esrog. That's how they call it in Latin. So that's what we have here. The argument can be made that a lot of the descriptions that Chazal gave regarding the esrogim apply to our citrus fruits. Most importantly, there's one that they say the taste of the fruit is in the wood. If you eat like a twig off of an apple tree, or I don't know, some other tree here, grapevine, you won't taste an apple or grapes. It doesn't taste like that. However, you taste the leaf or the wood of the esrog tree, it actually has esrog taste in it. But that is also true of lemon trees and orange trees and clementine trees. All the different citrus trees that we have here, they have a little bit of a taste. And they behave like the esrogim in all the ways that Chazal described. Chazal might even consider them varieties of esrogim. So maybe, perhaps, those special rules that govern esrogim that Chazal gave us should apply also to these other citrus fruits. Okay, I don't know. That's a good question. That's the type of thing that hopefully the Sanhedrin will decide. If every posek, they have the right to decide such things. But the problem is, if everybody's deciding, it'd be better if we had, let's say, not uniformity, but we would have, I guess, some sort of authority among us, so we could decide these things.